Good day, Spencer. Jerem.
We thought that we'd have a cup stacking display last night with Zach Selius. We did not.
Because it turns out that teammates totally fabricate things about other teammates.
And it made it
They
in.
think that's funny.
I thought it was funny. Zach's reaction was fantastic.
Yeah.
Also, we learned from Zach that he didn't pay attention to his sister
At all.
games.
At all.
But he got frozen lemonade.
He remembers that. Now, in his defense, he was like 8 or 9, I think, when she was playing. Like he was a wee lad when she was playing. That said, he wasn't too up to date with what she was doing. Yeah.
No more cup stacking with Zach.
And again, how hard would it have been to just try stacking a couple of cups? Yeah, give it a go. You never know until you try, right? He might have a hidden talent we don't even know about. We'll never get that chance.
He's an easy target for that team. Yeah. I love it. We'll go now to our Twitter question, Greg. BYU basketball will surprise you this season if fill in the blank.
The Cougars finish in the top 2 in the WCC regular season standings. Now, I'd be pleasant. Now, that'd be a great thing. I wouldn't be stunned or like, oh, it'd be a nice thing to happen, wouldn't it? You know, because they've been kind of in that third place hole for a while. It'd be nice to elevate and finish in the top 2. And it's doable. I mean, Gonzaga and St. Mary's are excellent teams, and it would take a lot of doing to get there, but they could do it. And I'd be pleasantly surprised if that happened.
Now, let's just say, and Jaron brought this up with me this morning, Gonzaga beats St. Mary's in Spokane tomorrow night. And then BYU goes into Moraga and stuns the Gales.
And suddenly you're even in the loss column.
Exactly.
Yes, now you'd be tied.
Yeah.
So I think BYU fans need to be rooting for Gonzaga. I think that St. Mary's is an easier target at the second spot.
And we'd have to favor Gonzaga playing at home and the way they've kind of rolled everybody. Now, the USF game was the closest game they'd had, and it was 10 points. Everything else was like in the 30s. Like their average margin of victory, I think, before USF was about 35. It's maybe down to low 30s, high 20s now. But they're just rolling people. It appears to me that they're taking this whole second-place pick in the WCC thing pretty seriously and letting everyone have it as a result. So, we favor the Zags at home. If they were to beat St. Mary's and then BYU takes care of business in Moraga, then suddenly you're in a second-place tie. And that top 2 finish is all of a sudden a lot more doable. Yeah.
I wonder, too, what that would do for the psyche of this team that doesn't have seniors, that's a little younger, that's adapting well, because they did lose 2 kind of early, and the climb is kind of hard. It's like playing in a game and you're down 18 or something and you have to come back. You just expend a lot of energy trying to get back in this. So I think that'd be a good situation for BYU. Take care of business this week and then see what happens next Thursday.
You know, I say top 2. Of course, the ideal is win the league, right? But you have an early home loss and an early slip-up loss, and so it kind of puts you 2 spots back. Because the top 2 teams haven't had either of those things happen yet, a home loss or a lower, quote-unquote, lower-tier loss, even though Pacific is not really a lower-tier team right now. They're tied for third with BYU. And they've looked good, actually. They've won 3 in a row. And it's clear that Damon Stoudemire, with the people he brought in, has some good things going. So the loss that BYU took in Stockton felt pretty rough at the time. And it's still a tough loss, but it's looking better in that Pacific has actually gone on won a couple games more, beat San Diego, and find themselves in a third-place tie right now.
The voice of the Cougars, Greg Wrubell, with us in Studio B, part of BYU Sports Nation, and our weekly BYU basketball coverage. If you had to create a headline for what BYU did against Pepperdine and Santa Clara last week, what would that headline contain?
Taking care of business is what it would say.
We talked about Tal Bachman yesterday.
Son of Randy Bachman.
Yeah, exactly.
Great Canadian, by the way. Randy
But
Bachman.
that's not a cool thing about Canada, right?
Not today.
Okay.
Of course, part of BTO, Bachman Turner Rover Drive, taking care of business. There you go. It's a circle of life right there. Yeah.
So they took care of business. Did we learn anything about BYU basketball in the last 2 games?
I think Dave Rose's lineup change had the desired effect. In terms of how they looked at the start of games, and having Zach on the floor does some good things for the BYU offense. It's no coincidence that they're I think they're 5-1 when he starts, and they've scored well when he plays. It's just it's a component of how BYU played last week, and I think it was a positive development. Yeah.
Zach's shooting like 75% or something from 2s, and the team is shooting well as well, which is a stat that matters.
Leads us to a stat that matters. Zach Selius, by the way, 73.5% on his 2-point field goal attempts. So there is value, I think, guys, in making the shots you expect to make. And BYU this year is shooting 55%, 54.9 to be precise, on its 2-point field goal attempts. And that's the best number of the Dave Rose era.
Wow.
Okay? And the best season-over-season improvement in years and years and years. They're up 4% on the 2-point field goals from just last year. Last year was, they had a pretty good inside player in Eric Mika, right? But they're still 4% better on the inside shots right now than they were last year with Eric Mika. It helps when Yoeli's dunking everything, but between Yoeli and Zach Sellius and Luke Worthington, those three primarily, BYU's doing well around the rim. You don't recall too many games like, they're missing all these bunnies. That's not a problem with this year's team. And again, there's value in making the shots you expect to make. And that's what BYU's doing for the most part. As you see there with Eli, they've got good drivers and really good finishers around the rim. So that's a high number, 55%, and helps their effective field goal percentage number, which is also very high for the Dave Rose era. So that's, I think, a stat that matters. When they get close to the basket, they're making it count. And you want to be able to count on those.
How realistic is it to think that BYU can keep up a pace like that as they get further and further into West Coast Conference play?
Well, I think it's who BYU is. And when Dalton Nixon gets back, that's one more good in-close finisher. He's another high 2%, two-point guy. So I think that's who we are and who BYU is right now. When Dalton gets back, I think it gets even better. And Yoeli Childs may or may not keep up his 20-plus point per game pace. But I think, again, that's who he is. And a lot of what he does depends on how well the shooters are shooting, the outside guys. Because if you can make teams pay for doubling Yoeli, he'll see fewer doubles and have a better opportunity keeping that number very, very high. Because when you kind of guard him one-on-one, he's shown kind of a Jock Landale-like propensity to get to the rim and finish. And so I think as long as TJ and Elijah and now Zach, McKay Cannon are making people pay outside, it'll be less tempting to want to double Yoeli in the post.
BYU and LMU, and then San Diego this week. LMU, an interesting game. USD, a particularly interesting game given their defense, but both at home.
LMU is a chuck it and crash team again. They're a good 3-point team with certain guys like Stephen Haney, but for the most part, they just want to throw it up and then go get it. They're a great offensive rebound. They're a top 10 offensive rebounding team, but BYU's a top 10 defensive rebounding team, so it's a good matchup there on Thursday. And LMU brought in a couple of really good skilled. James Bateman is a tremendous point guard, and you'll see him on Thursday. He's averaging 17, 18 points a game. But again, their style is very frenetic. They force a ton of turnovers. It is a very, again, helter-skelter type style, including on the offensive end. And that's a home game to start the weekend. San Diego on Saturday. It's interesting. It's one of their better teams, clearly. The numbers all show it. But they've played 6 games in the Marriott Center since joining the WCC. They're 0-6, and the average margin of defeat's 29 points. Now, there was a 58-point loss.
Yeah,
in
the
their
91 to 33 game.
That skews things, but that said, they've never been within single digits of BYU in Provo. Even including before they joined the WCC, they played 7 times in Provo, never been closer than 10 points. So historically, it's a team BYU handles well in this building.
Greg Wrubell with us on BYU Sports Nation. TJ Haas scored 10 and 14 in the 2 wins for BYU last week. We've spent a great deal of time talking about his role and what he means to this basketball team. What do you think was different for him in the 2 games against Pepperdine and Santa Clara?
It's going to sound really elementary, but he made the shots that he'd been missing. Yet, when I went back and watched those 2 games again, I was watching some more video of him last night, it just seemed like the quick release, quick fire, confident shooting TJ it felt a little different to me. Maybe because the shots were made, but it just felt like that guy was back again last week. And I think it really was just a matter of him making shots that he had been missing that we expect him to make. He was 4 of 5 on the weekend in Santa Clara, and it just again kind of looked like, oh, that's our guy. That's TJ back again. And as Dave said on our coaches show last night, all around he thinks TJ is a better player. And again, the numbers kind of bear that out. It was really just the missed shots that he's been making that weren't there this year that kind of kept him from keeping his numbers where they were. Whether it's floaters or threes, he was more automatic last year than he had been this year, and maybe that's a good sign that he's coming back around. Because again, it just looked right watching him pull and fire against Santa Clara.
Yoeli Childs said last night that even if TJ doesn't score as much, he's making great decisions. Mm-hmm. I think somebody's got to emerge as the third scorer, or 2 guys.
Well, he is that guy. He is the third scorer.
He needs to be that guy, right?
Well, he is. He already is. He was and he is. I mean, there are 3 guys averaging double figures, and TJ's the third guy. He is the third of the big 3. And again, it's just a matter of shots dropping, and he is good enough to make those shots. And he's been that guy for years and years and years. Like Dave hinted at that last night. That's who he's been. He's been a scorer of the ball all his life. That's what he's got to get back to doing at a little higher level, and I think we saw a good sign about it. Yeah.
All right, Greg, I don't know how you top the Niblick from last week, but we're going to let you attempt to do that with today's A Cool Thing About Canada.
Okay. So as everyone out there in the audience knows, Brantford, Ontario is the home of Wayne Gretzky. But Brantford has a lot more going for it than just being the home of Wayne Gretzky. Did you know that Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, emigrated from Scotland to Brantford, Ontario? And it was in Brantford, Ontario that he invented the telephone. In his own words, now it so happens that the telephone was invented in Brantford during my visit to my father and mother in 1874. So he had a home there in Brantford, Ontario, where he invented the phone, and the first long-distance phone call ever made. There's old Alex doing his thing. Yeah, that's that's like the old school version of the flip phone. That was like really old school right there. Yeah, the first long-distance phone call was made in Canada, from Brantford to a couple of the towns surrounding Brantford. Yeah.
The original great one, Alexander Graham Bell.
Followed by the later great one, Wayne Gretzky, all in Brantford, Ontario.
The original great one.
Yeah.
Old Alex doing his thing.
Who knew that Brantford was
Big
home
Al.
of so many
Yeah.
important things?
Yeah. Brantford, it's slightly southwest of Toronto, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything that Canada can't do?
Isn't that the question?
That is
yeah,
the question. With this
Are
is
we
how
really going there right now?
I'm feeling stronger and stronger about that as this continues.
That segment paid for by the Public Relations for Canada Tourism
National
Department.
Tourism. Hey, a quick word about Behind the Mic tonight.
Yes.
BYU men's volleyball is pretty good.
Yeah.
Their head coach, Sean Olmstead, is on tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Travis Hansen is on tonight.
Hey-o.
And Jason Shepard, our friend Jason Shepard.
Shep.
Yeah.
Now, for Sean, I'd give a couple extra minutes. If you have X amount of time, I would just add a few.
I'll do it. Yeah.
He's excellent for this
He's
format.
getting 5 more.
He's excellent for this
Oh,
format.
this is
We love Sean.
perfect
Yes.
format for Sean Olmstead to
Yes.
crush.
I gave him a hard time at the Y Awards a few years ago. I was like, dude, you were the longest speaker at 4:03 when I produced. And then the next year he goes up there and he says, someone said I was the longest speaker, so I'm going to try and be shorter. He was still the longest speaker. But
I'll give him extra time.
He's awesome.
All right, 8 Eastern, 6 Mountain,
Mhm.
BYU Radio, Behind the Mic with
Listen
Greg Wrubell.
in, live or on demand.